Hey everyone, tonight we're starting at Gate 42 of Denver International Airport. I was standing there, navy blue pantsuit, pressed carry-on, wheeled neatly to my side, heart gently fluttering at the thought of monkey watching with my grandchildren in Costa Rica, when my daughter said the words that cracked something open inside me. Mom, we need to talk. You might think that sentence precedes a confession about cancelled flights or lost passports. But not this time. This was a different kind of turbulence. So before you feel too safe in your expectations, or maybe just too sure that family always means inclusion, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And tell me in the comments, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you right now? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise, and let's get started tonight. Rebecca's mouth was moving, but my brain was doing that thing it does when your heart gets ahead of logic. Like when you hear the doctor say, "We found something," or when your spouse of 40 years says, "I need to tell you something." Your body keeps standing, but your soul quietly sinks into a chair somewhere nearby. "We can't take you with us," she said. Just like that. No medical emergency, no passport mishap. Just a sudden rewrite of reality complete with business-class boarding passes. That didn't include me. "Dave's boss is coming last minute," she added, trying to fill the silence. "It's become more of a business trip. It just wouldn't be appropriate." Appropriate. That word has done more violence to women in cardigans than most action films combined. Dave couldn't meet my eyes. Emma and Michael gave me brief, distracted hugs. One was mid-tap on a screen, the other asking why Grandma couldn't come see the monkeys. What do you say to a child who still believes in fairness? "I have things to take care of at home," I said, my smile so smooth it could have been ironed. Rebecca didn't hug me goodbye. She herded her family toward the gate like I was an unexpected crowd control problem. As they disappeared down the jetway, the gate attendant gave me a look. Not pity, not curiosity. Something worse, she couldn't tell if I was lost or just forgotten. Fun fact, the average airport terminal has over 14 surveillance cameras. None of them saw the moment a 73-year-old woman realized her life had been quietly slipping away behind her daughter's success. I stood frozen long after their plane began taxiing. A younger version of myself might have called a friend, or a therapist, or maybe just cried. But I didn't cry. Instead, I walked toward the main terminal, like I was headed to war with only a carry-on, a 3-year-old travel folder, and the strange strength of a woman who has nothing left to lose. Old age wisdom says you never get truly lost, just rerouted. And this reroute, it was about to land me in the most important meeting of my life. The wheels of my suitcase echoed down the corridor, steady and deliberate. Funny how betrayal sharpens your senses. I could suddenly hear every airport noise, the clink of coffee cups behind a barista's smile, the boarding announcements read in indifferent tones, the scrape of toddler shoes skipping too close to the edge of an escalator. But inside me, silence. That full-bodied, bone-deep kind that comes not from peace, but from shock. My daughter had just surgically removed me from her life's itinerary, without anesthesia. I found a plastic seat near baggage claim and sat like I was waiting for someone to explain what had just happened. Spoiler alert, no one did. And then slowly the silence inside turned into something else, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in a while. Anger. Not the fire-breathing kind. No, this was cold, calculated, clean. The kind that arrives late but wears heels and knows how to walk. I thought about calling a taxi, going home, making tea, tucking the humiliation into a shoebox like I had so many times before. Instead, my fingers moved toward a different name in my phone. One I hadn't dialed in nearly a year, Peterson Aviation Services. "Peterson Aviation," came the crisp voice. "How can we assist?" "This is Anna Washington," I said, surprised by how level I sounded. "I need a plane to Chicago, within the hour." Pause. "Of course, Mrs. Washington. The usual aircraft." "Yes. Cabin configured for business, please. I'll need full privacy and communications." "Understood." Shall I notify your driver? I glanced at my suitcase. I hadn't packed for business. But then again, this wasn't a business trip. This was a resurrection. Yes, and tell Thomas I'll be waiting at the private terminal in 15. I stood up, smoothed my jacket. My reflection in the dark glass behind the escalator looked strangely unfamiliar, like someone I used to be before I let motherhood make me soft around the edges. Here's a little-known academic debate you won't find in parenting books. Does nurturing require invisibility? Or have we just accepted that mothers must disappear to prove they care? I had disappeared for years, smiled when interrupted, shrunk when dismissed, funded school trips and mortgage payments while pretending it didn't sting when they forgot my birthday. Grown women don't usually cry in airport terminals, but today I made an exception. Except my tears didn't fall. They just receded like tide making way for something bigger. The private terminal was glass and quiet worlds, apart from the chaos of commercial travel. The uniformed attendant greeted me like an old friend. "Welcome back, Mrs. Washington. We'll have you airborne shortly. Can I take your bag?" I handed it over, careful to avoid looking as frail as my daughter clearly assumed I'd become. Walking toward the tarmac, I felt the heat of the pavement rise through my shoes. The jet waited like a secret I'd been keeping even from myself. Fact, most people think wealth changes people. It doesn't. It reveals them. And as I stepped up into the cabin, the weight of Gate 42 slipped off my shoulders like an old coat that no longer fit. I had spent so many years being useful, helpful, generous. My reward, a text message and a soft dismissal. Well, maybe it was time I stopped being useful and started being powerful. As the engines roared to life, I reached for the in-flight console and scrolled through my private contacts. Lawyers, bankers, advisors, not to cause drama, but to redraw the map of my life and finally stop handing out tickets to those who no longer respected the journey. The jet sliced through the clouds, like it remembered how to carry a woman with purpose. I hadn't felt this alive at 35, let alone 73. I stretched my legs and let the hum of the engines fill the silence. I used to find it comforting, the familiar white noise of movement. Walter and I used to joke that a Gulf Stream was cheaper than therapy. Turns out it still is. Somewhere over Iowa, I reached for the tablet on the armrest and pulled up my encrypted contacts list. It was alphabetical, like I'd ever need to look up these names in any other order. Chen Sarah Stylist, Gordon Allen Financial Advisor, Patterson Jonathan Estate Law. He'd been Walter's guy before he was mine. I trusted him with everything, including the plans I was about to set in motion. A message buzzed in, from Rebecca. "Just landed. The kids already love it here. Thanks for understanding, Mom. Talk soon. Thanks for understanding." I deleted it. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something myself. I'd raised a daughter who believed love was convenient, that it could be scheduled, rearranged, or simply cancelled if it made other people uncomfortable. And for years I let that happen. I smiled and baked cookies and wrote checks. I told myself she was busy, that motherhood had changed, that I wasn't needed in the same ways anymore. But you know what else had changed me? Old age wisdom. You don't really lose power in your 70s. You just lose the tolerance to keep pretending you don't have it. I tapped Jonathan's name and waited. Patterson came the familiar voice. "It's Anna," I said. "I need to meet. This afternoon, if possible." "That's a bit short notice." "It's urgent." He paused. "Are we talking Morrison business or personal?" "Both," I said. "It's time I updated my financial arrangements, and I want to make some changes to the trust." "Understood. My conference room is yours." As I hung up, I allowed myself a single chuckle. Walter used to say I was born with a filing cabinet where most people had a heart. But that wasn't fair. I had a heart. I just kept it buried under spreadsheets, wills, and check registers. Organized, but lonely. The truth is, I'd spent the last decade playing the role of the modest widow. Quiet. Helpful. Always available. I wore soft beige sweaters and nodded through stories about modern parenting. I never let on that the modest house I lived in was a choice, not a sentence, or that the old Honda in my driveway had its own garage at the private terminal. Here's a weird little fact I picked up once during an executive retreat in Aspen. Penguins propose to their mates with pebbles. They don't have diamonds. They have instinct. They choose once, and they choose wisely. I had given Rebecca all my pebbles. Now I was fresh out. We landed at Midway just before noon. Thomas, my driver, greeted me with the usual, "Welcome back, Mrs. Washington." "Straight to the law office," I said, sliding into the back seat. He caught my eyes in the mirror. "Everything all right?" "Actually, Thomas," I said with a small smile, "everything is about to be. Chicago in June has a buzz to it. Even the traffic feels purposeful." As we cut through LaSalle Street toward the gleaming tower that housed Patterson Webb and Associates, I pulled out my leather folder, yes, the same one Rebecca had gifted me 3 Christmases ago, and checked off a list I'd started writing in my head sometime between Denver and 35,000 feet. Revoke tuition payments, cancel mortgage supplements, suspend vacation fund, draft letter of explanation, stay calm, be exact. Thomas opened the door for me like he always did, but this time I stepped out differently. Not like someone seeking advice, but like someone about to give it. The receptionist smiled. "Mrs. Washington, Mr. Patterson is expecting you." As I waited by the elevator, I realized something profound, well profound, in that way you only feel when the floor beneath you hasn't quite settled. This wasn't the end of anything. This was the opening chapter of something new, and for the first time in years I was writing it myself. Jonathan Patterson had always struck me as a man who knew when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. That's what made him an exceptional estate attorney. That, and his hair, which had somehow defied aging even better than I had. Silver and authoritative, like a Supreme Court justice on vacation. "Anna," he said, rising from the leather chair at the end of the conference table, "you look resolved. Good. That's exactly what I am," I said, unbuttoning my blazer and sitting down with the air of someone who no longer needed permission to speak plainly. "Would you like coffee?" "Yes. Black. No sugar." He gestured toward Margaret, his assistant, who glided out of the room without a word. We both waited until the door clicked shut behind her. "Walk me through it," he said. And I did. I told him about the airport, about the look on Rebecca's face, about the way Dave had stared at his phone like it might beam him out of the uncomfortable moment, about the silence that followed as their plane took off, leaving me standing there like a TSA inconvenience. "I want to end all financial support," I said, sliding my leather folder across the table. "And I want it in writing, irrevocable, effective in 30 days. Jonathan opened the folder and scanned the tabs. One for each stream of quiet generosity I'd been providing: tuition mortgage top-ups, summer camps, family vacations, even the occasional emergency plumbing repair. You'd think my name was not Anna. "Are you sure?" he asked, glancing up. "These changes will have far-reaching effects." "There's an academic term for what I've been doing," I said, easing back into the chair. "It's called financial enabling. And I've been doing it in a deluxe, climate-controlled, silk-gloved fashion." Jonathan made a note on a legal pad. "Would you like to provide a formal reason in the letter to Rebecca?" "Yes," I said. "But not emotional, professional. I want her to understand that this isn't a punishment. It's a shift in policy." He smiled faintly. "Very Anna of you." Margaret returned with coffee. It smelled rich and dark like closure. "Anything else?" Jonathan asked, as he opened a new folder and began drafting language. "Yes. I want to review my will. I'm considering revising my estate plan entirely." That got his full attention. "You're thinking of excluding Rebecca?" "Not excluding," I said carefully. "Reallocating, scaling her portion back. I'm considering establishing a foundation." He nodded slowly. "That's a significant shift." "I'm a significant woman," I replied, sipping my coffee. "It's about time I acted like one." Old age wisdom moment. Most people wait until they're on their deathbed to rewrite the story. But there's something to be said for editing your life while you're still the one holding the pen. Jonathan spent the next hour working through the legal logistics, while I made a few calls from the corner chair, my bank, the school, even my financial planner. Each call was its own form of liberation, like cutting away the ropes from a hot air balloon. And let me tell you, freedom has excellent acoustics. When he finally handed me the draft letter, it read like a quarterly shareholder update firm, courteous, non-negotiable. I approved it with only one edit. I asked that it close with a line I'd been holding in my heart since the moment I'd watched that boarding gate close. I love you. But I love myself too, and I can no longer accept being treated as optional by people I've made central in my life. After I signed the documents, Jonathan leaned back and studied me the way an art collector might look at a painting he hadn't appreciated until it was restored. I have to say, Anna, he said, I've known you for over 20 years, and I've never seen you like this. I haven't been like this in a long time, I replied. Turns out being taken for granted is a hell of a good wake-up call. He stood to walk me out, but I paused at the conference table. One last thing I said. Yes. Make sure the courier delivers the envelope Thursday morning. I want her to open it just as she's coming back from Costa Rica. It'll give her the weekend to read it. And reread it. Understood. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed the oil portraits of partners, long-gone men, with names that sounded like investment banks, and expressions that said nothing could surprise them. Well, maybe not them, but me. I had just surprised the hell out of myself. Here's something quirky you probably don't know. Eleanor Roosevelt carried a loaded pistol in her purse when she traveled alone. Not because she wanted to use it, but because she wanted to remember she didn't have to be helpless. I wasn't carrying a pistol, just a folder of signed documents. But for the first time in years, I felt just as protected. When I got back to the jet that evening, the sky over Chicago was doing that sulky violet thing it does before a summer storm. Clouds piled up like gossip, dark and heavy, full of things left unsaid. Fitting, really. Inside the cabin, I dropped my bag onto the leather seat and sat down with an exhale that had probably been building for 15 years. The captain's voice came through the intercom. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Washington. Flight time to Denver is just under 3 hours. We've filed for altitude 38,000 feet. Cabin yours for the duration. I thumbed the intercom and replied, Thank you, Captain. And yes, I'd like privacy. What I needed wasn't small talk or champagne. I needed stillness, and maybe for once to be honest with myself. So I did something I rarely do. I opened my journal. Not the one I kept on my desk at home, all floral print and sticky tabs. No, this was the black leather-bound one I only brought on long flights. The one that still smelled faintly like Walter's cologne, even though I hadn't used it in years. And I started writing, not about what Rebecca had done, but what I had allowed. You see, when Walter died, I didn't just lose a husband. I lost the buffer. The one person who reminded our daughter that I was more than just a caregiver with a checkbook. After he passed, I stepped into the role Rebecca seemed to need, the ever-available helper, the gentle fallback, the wallet in a wool cardigan. I remembered the first time I paid their mortgage just this once. It was right after Michael was born. Dave had taken time off work, and Rebecca was adjusting to motherhood with the grace of a baby giraffe, beautiful, but clumsy and loud. They were struggling, and I wanted to help. So I wrote a check. Then another, then another. Over time, the help stopped being help, it became expectation. Silent, slippery. Like how you gain weight after menopause and don't realize it until your favorite dress sighs at the zipper. There's a concept in behavioral economics called anchoring bias. It means people tend to rely too heavily on the first piece of information given to them. I had anchored Rebecca to the idea that I'd always say yes. Always be there. Always pay. But generosity without boundaries isn't kindness, it's currency. And mine had been devalued for years. An old proverb I once read on a tea bag of all places came back to me. The axe forgets, but the tree remembers. That Tuesday morning at Gate 42, that was when the tree decided it had had enough. The flight was smooth. At cruising altitude, I stretched out and looked out the window at nothing in particular. Below us were clouds, layered like frosting, indifferent and white. Somewhere beneath those clouds, Rebecca was probably sipping something fruity and frozen, while my absence was already fading from her mind. Let me be clear, this wasn't revenge. This was rebalancing. I wasn't going to be her emergency fund anymore. Or her emotional sponge. I'd spent too many holidays cleaning up her kitchen after meals I hadn't been asked to help plan. Too many weekends babysitting while she attended wellness retreats. Too many conversations that started with "Mom, can you?" and ended with me pretending I wasn't disappointed. I deserved better. Not because I had given so much, but because I was a whole person, one who had lived, built, succeeded, and sacrificed. And I was done erasing myself to keep the family peace. You know what I miss, boardrooms. God, I missed those. The smell of coffee, the sting of dry erase markers, the tension in a room right before you deliver a counteroffer that makes a man in a $6,000 suit sweat. I used to love that part of me. The version of Anna who could flip through a profit and loss statement while sipping her espresso and still catch a decimal out of place. I had put her in the closet like an old coat, out of season, out of sight. But not anymore. Not after Tuesday. Somewhere over Nebraska, I closed the journal and felt not peace exactly, but something adjacent. Like the moment after a storm, when you notice the leaves are still attached to the trees, and maybe stronger than before. As we began our descent into Denver, the lights of the city came into view, glittering like static on an old television set. Each speck of light was a life, a family, a woman who might also be sitting alone, wondering how she got written out of her own story. Well, I was done wondering. I was ready to write myself back in, and this time, I wouldn't be asking for permission. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, sunlight peeking through the slats in the blinds like nosy neighbors. The linens smelled faintly of lavender, the scent I'd always used when Walter was alive. But that morning, I didn't feel sentimental. I felt sharp. I got up and made myself breakfast, not the rushed toast and jam routine I'd mastered for decades, but a full breakfast. Eggs, avocado toast, cut into perfect diagonals. I even used the good china. The eggs weren't spectacular, but the ceremony of it all? Delicious. While the kettle hissed and the coffee brewed, I opened my kitchen drawer and pulled out an old yellow notepad. Not for grocery lists this time. For a tally. A different kind of inventory. At the top, I wrote, what I've given Rebecca and what she's never seen. And then I started listing. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Down payment on their house, $40,000. Monthly mortgage supplement, $1,200 for 10 years. $144,000. Tuition for both children. So far, $68,000. Vacation fund contributions estimated $20,000. Emergency repairs, unexpected gifts, and lifestyle patchwork too many to count. Emotional labor immeasurable. Now here's the funny part. Until that moment, I'd never actually added it all up. Like many women of my generation, I believed generosity didn't require receipts. But suddenly, I wanted the numbers. Not to throw in anyone's face, but to prove to myself I hadn't imagined the weight I'd been carrying. Over $400,000. That's not love. That's a funding strategy. And when I saw it on paper in my own handwriting, I laughed. Not the cheerful kind of laugh. The tired kind. Like when you finally find your missing keys. In the fridge. There's a quirky psychological term for this phenomenon, cognitive dissonance. It's when you hold two conflicting truths at once and pretend they don't clash. I had been doing that for years, loving Rebecca deeply, but quietly grieving the daughter I no longer recognized, supporting her lifestyle while erasing my own. I stood at the kitchen counter eating eggs off the edge of a porcelain plate and thinking, this is how women disappear. Not suddenly, but gradually. one mortgage check at a time. That afternoon, I opened the hall closet and started pulling things out. The cardigan I wore to Emma's first birthday party still smelling like frosting and regret. The flats I'd worn to Rebecca's office promotion dinner, where she'd introduced me to her co-workers as just my mum, but she's super helpful with the kids. The blouse I wore to the last family photo, where Dave had asked me to hold his jacket while he adjusted the camera. Everything I picked up had a story attached. A quiet one. A support role. And every time I had said yes, smiled, folded myself smaller so she could shine brighter. I boxed it all. Not because I was getting rid of the clothes, but because I was clearing the symbolism out of my house. The costumes of the version of me that had played supporting actress in the story of Rebecca's life. There's an old age wisdom quote I once saw printed on a coffee mug. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Well, class was over. I spent the next few hours reorganizing my office. You'd be amazed how much dust gathers on your ambition when you don't use it. I pulled out old Morrison financial binders, my stock portfolio folders, quarterly reports I'd been reviewing half-heartedly while stirring soup. Then I found it, a folder marked Walter Legacy Notes. Inside his handwriting, looping neat and wildly confident. A note dated 2008, just a year before he passed. Anna, if you're reading this without me around, remember this. You were always the better half, and not just at home, at the table, at the firm, at life. Don't you dare let anyone forget that not even our daughter, especially not her. I didn't cry. I smiled. And I whispered, not anymore, darling. By sunset, I was sitting on the back patio, sipping a glass of Pinot Noir, not because I needed to unwind, but because I was celebrating something small and seismic. I had finally stopped feeling guilty for outgrowing the role Rebecca had boxed me into. I wasn't done being a mother. I was done being an accessory. And when I checked my email one last time before bed, there it was, a delivery confirmation from the courier service. Package delivered 10:47 a.m., signed for by R. Lambert, Rebecca's married name. I closed my laptop with a quiet satisfaction and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be interesting. But tonight was the first night in years I went to sleep not wondering when I'd next be needed. And that, my friends, is what peace sounds like. Saturday morning arrived with unsettling precision, like it had RSVP'd to my week. Birds chirped too optimistically for what I knew was coming, and the sunlight had that bright, annoying clarity you only get when you're about to have an uncomfortable conversation. At exactly 10:15 a.m., my phone rang. Rebecca. I let it ring 4 times. Walter used to say it gave you the upper hand. Even if you're waiting by the phone, he'd whisper, make 'em think you're deciding whether or not to care. When I picked up, I made sure my voice was steady, calm, unapologetic. Hello, Rebecca. Mom, she snapped. What the hell is this? And just like that, the conversation began. She wasn't angry. She was panicked. Her voice trembled the way it used to when she'd call from college saying she'd maxed out her card, but only on textbooks and maybe some accessories. This letter, this packet of legal stuff, she said. What is this supposed to mean? I sipped my coffee. Real ceramic mug, real milk, real calm. It means what it says, sweetheart. You're cutting us off. I'm ending the financial support I've been providing, I said. Yes, but you can't just... Mom, we depend on that. You know our mortgage, Emma and Michael's school. What are we supposed to do? Live within your means, I thought. Out loud, I said, I trust that you and Dave, with your degrees and salaries, will figure it out. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing like she was pacing. This is because of Costa Rica, isn't it? Oh, the audacity of that sentence. I waited a beat before replying. It's not about Costa Rica, Rebecca. It's about every decision that came before it, and every time I allowed myself to be treated like an obligation instead of a human being. She was quiet, then softening her voice to that syrupy tone she always used when she wanted something mum. I know we could have handled that morning better. I'm sorry if we made you feel left out. Feel left out? I laughed. Sweetheart, you told me I couldn't come. You stood there, looked me in the eye, and dismissed me like I was a TSA announcement. She didn't reply. Do you know what it's like to realize you were only ever part of someone's plans when it was convenient? I added. That maybe love in your world has always been conditional on usefulness. She tried again. Can we just talk about this in person? I'll take you to lunch. Somewhere nice. Why? So you can manage me in a public place. A beat of silence. Bullseye. Mom, I'm trying here, she said, finally showing a crack of honesty. I'm scared. I'm not just scared about the money. I'm scared I've broken something I can't fix. That got to me. Because in her voice, I finally heard my daughter. Not the polished professional, not the perfectionist mom, but the scared, unsure girl who used to cling to my hand in parking lots like I was the only thing keeping her grounded. Still, I stayed steady. Rebecca, I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to liberate myself. From us. From the version of myself who quietly funded your life while being treated like background furniture. There's this theory in sociology, yes, I know, academic again, called role engulfment. It's when someone's entire identity becomes consumed by the role they play for others. That was me. The mother, the grandmother, the helper, the donor, but not the person. Can you just give us some time to adjust? She asked. Maybe a few months. We weren't expecting this. No, you weren't. That's the problem. You never expected the money. You assumed it. And assumptions, as we know, are the termites of relationships. I'll need to talk to Dave, she muttered. Of course, I said lightly. Talk to your husband. Talk to your accountant. But don't talk to me unless you're ready to see me as more than your contingency plan. Is this forever? That's up to you, I said, my voice softening just a notch. I'll always be your mother, Rebecca. But I won't always be your safety net. You're going to have to learn the difference. She sighed. Mom, what do you want from me? And there it was, finally. The question I had waited years to hear. I want you to see me, I said. Not just the woman who picks up the bill. Not just the grandmother who watches the kids. Me. The woman who built a business from nothing. The woman who managed a marriage, a company, and your childhood without losing her mind or her heart. A pause. Then she whispered, I didn't know you felt this way. That's the saddest part, sweetheart. You never asked. We hung up not long after. There was no shouting, no dramatic closing statement. Just silence. But not the kind that hurts. The kind that clears the stage for what comes next. I leaned back in my chair and watched the breeze rustle the curtains. It would be easy to frame this moment as victory. But it wasn't. It was loss. Cleansing, necessary, overdue loss. And sometimes the hardest part of healing is admitting you needed to hurt first. I spent the rest of that Saturday walking circles in my living room, not out of anxiety but anticipation. My steps traced invisible lines across the floor, as if I could chart a path through what came next. I had made my decision, delivered it cleanly, legally, with civility. Now I had to live in the silence that follows. The Sunday paper came, and I ignored it. The crossword sat half done. I didn't touch my knitting or check the weather. I simply sat at the kitchen table with my coffee cooling beside me, watching the minutes turn into hours, waiting for the sound of something breaking. A phone call, an email, a knock at the door. But nothing came, and maybe that was the most jarring part. People always expect eruptions when you shake the ground, but sometimes the tremors come in waves, quiet and slow, like grief rearranging your furniture. On Monday, I went back to work. Yes, work. Morrison Financial hadn't seen me in 3 years. Officially, I'd been retired. In truth, I'd been fading, a silent partner in more ways than one. But now I wanted back in. Anna Patricia Valdez blinked at me in the hallway like she'd seen a ghost. You look different, better, more here. And she was right. I wasn't just in the building, I was present. The first meeting I attended was on the Hartwell proposal, a merger that had been floating on the edge of possibility for months. David Morrison walked in, carrying 4 binders and a hunch that only middle-aged executives develop. Anna, he said, beaming, you don't know how glad I am to see you. That makes two of us. He filled me in on the details while I flipped through the financials, highlighting inconsistencies before he even finished explaining the deal. At one point, a junior associate leaned over and whispered, "Wait, is she that Anna Washington?" I smiled without turning. The one and only. By noon, I was back in my old office, smaller than the one David had inherited, but filled with my energy once again. The windows hadn't changed. The city below still pulsed with ambition. But the woman behind the desk, she had remembered what she was capable of. Here's something I bet you didn't know: octopuses have 3 hearts and can detach limbs when threatened. They literally cut off parts of themselves to escape predators and then regrow them. That's how I felt. Like I'd shed something painful, and now I was healing into someone more whole. By Tuesday, I'd rejoined 2 committees. By Wednesday, I was reviewing strategy proposals. And by Thursday, I found myself laughing actual deep-chested laughter during a brainstorming session over lunch. Nobody asked me to babysit. Nobody told me I was too much. Nobody expected me to keep the peace or smooth things over. They just listened. Because in this room, I was Anna Washington, founding partner, visionary, quiet typhoon in a silk scarf, not someone's mother, not someone's afterthought. That evening, I stopped at Nordstrom for a few things. Nothing extravagant, just new shoes, a blazer that made me feel like myself again, a lip color Rebecca would probably call bold, in that way daughters do when they're not quite sure whether to compliment or criticize. I walked out of that store with one bag in hand and one truth pressed against my ribs. I had allowed my life to become a series of whispered compromises, but not anymore. By Friday, the week had become something entirely unfamiliar mine. No school pickup, no early morning grocery runs for Rebecca, no texts that started with "Mom, do you mind?" Just space, possibility, and a very clean calendar. I made dinner for myself, pasta from scratch, and opened a bottle of wine that had been sitting in my rack for 3 years, waiting for the right occasion. Well, I figured, being myself again was occasion enough. I was halfway through twirling the first bite when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Strange. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Washington." "Yes, this is Jenna from Lakeside Montessori. We were just calling to confirm that tuition payments will no longer be handled by you as per the notice we received." "That's correct." She hesitated. "It's just, Emma and Michael are such wonderful students. We'll do everything we can to help them transition if needed." I closed my eyes, heart clenching, but just for a moment. "I'm sure their parents will make the best decision for their family," I said. "Of course. I hope they know what a gift your support has been." I hung up gently. And for the first time, I didn't feel like crying afterward. Old age wisdom guilt is just love with poor boundaries. And I had finally drawn mine. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp finality of a signature on paper. Clear skies, a breeze, birds flitting around the backyard like nothing was collapsing anywhere. Of course, they didn't know that today Rebecca would open her front door and discover that the ground had shifted. And at 10:42 a.m. it did. My phone rang. Again, 4 rings before I answered. "Hello, Rebecca." "Mom." Her voice cracked. No anger this time, just disbelief. We read everything. There was a long pause. I didn't rush to fill it. I don't know where to begin," she finally said. "That's probably a good sign. It means you're thinking instead of just reacting." A soft exhale. "The numbers. I mean, I knew you'd helped us, but I didn't realize it was that much." $400,000, give or take," I said. Though I stopped keeping detailed track about 3 yoga retreats ago. I heard a tiny laugh, nervous, sad, confused. "I feel awful." "Good. That means you're not broken, just late." Another pause. "Then can we talk in person?" "I'd like that," I said. "But not at a restaurant. And not over wine where you'll try to flatter me back into submission." Her silence confirmed the tactic had crossed her mind. "Let's meet at your place," I said. "The house I helped pay for." I could hear her swallow. "Okay. This afternoon. 3 o'clock? When I arrived, the air in their upscale neighborhood was suspiciously calm, like the universe hadn't received the memo that a reckoning was underway. Dave opened the door, his face a strange blend of relief and dread. Anna, thanks for coming. Inside the house looked the same, but felt different, as if it knew. The granite counters, the polished floors, the carefully curated photo gallery wall that featured vacations I'd partially funded without ever being in the frame. Rebecca met me in the living room. No makeup, no armor, just her. Do you want tea coffee? Respect, I said, but tea would be nice too. We sat. The cup trembled slightly in her hand. I owe you an apology. You owe me several. But let's start with one and see how it feels. She nodded. I'm sorry for Costa Rica. I'm sorry for how I handled it. I lied. I knew we didn't want you there, and instead of telling you honestly, I made up a story. I thought I was protecting your feelings. No, sweetheart, I said gently. You were protecting your comfort. I know, she whispered. There was a long silence, not uncomfortable, just real. Do you know what the hardest part was? I asked. It wasn't being left out of the trip. It was realizing that I'd become optional. That after all the love and support and money and time, you could still look at me and say, you don't fit into this picture. She blinked fast. I never meant to make you feel that way. I know. That's what makes it worse. Dave cleared his throat. I think we both got comfortable. We weren't malicious, just lazy, I said. You got lazy with your gratitude. With your assumptions, you started seeing my generosity as a given. Rebecca looked at me then, really looked. Why didn't you tell me you were wealthy? Because I didn't want you to chase my shadow, I said. I wanted you to believe your success was your own. And now I realize that hiding who I am made it easier for you to treat me like less. We sat in silence for a moment. I want to change, she said softly. Then change. It won't happen overnight. I'm 73, Rebecca, I said, sipping my tea. I've got time. I just don't have patience for being used. There's an old age wisdom nugget my accountant once told me, though I'm not sure he meant it metaphorically. You don't notice the leak until the floorboards shift. Well, my floorboards had shifted, and I wasn't ignoring the dampness anymore. Do you still want a relationship with us? Dave asked quietly. Yes. I just want it to be real. I want you to want me here. Not because of what I can offer, but because you see me. I do now, Rebecca whispered. Maybe for the first time. You're going to have to learn how to stand without me holding you up, I said. You've been leaning on me so long, you've forgotten you have legs. We're scared, she admitted. Good. That means you're growing. She reached for my hand, and this time I let her. Mom, I know this doesn't fix everything, but I'm listening. And I'm willing. That's more than I've had in years. In that moment, something in the room shifted. Not resolved, not healed, but started. And sometimes that's enough. 3 weeks passed. Quiet ones. No emergencies, no last-minute requests, no guilt-laced invitations masked as obligations. Just space. Rebecca didn't call every day. She didn't try to explain herself again. But every few days, she'd send something small. A photo of Michael drawing in the backyard. A picture of Emma holding up a book I'd once read to Rebecca herself. No captions, no apologies, just offerings, gentle reminders that maybe she was trying. And that was enough, for now. On the 4th Saturday, I got in my car and drove to the place I hadn't visited in nearly a decade, the small community centre in Park Hill. This was where Walter and I used to run free financial literacy workshops back in the day, where we taught young couples how to budget, showed single mums how to set up retirement accounts, explained compound interest to wide-eyed high schoolers who didn't know a 401k from a kitchen sink. The building hadn't changed, still smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner, still had that one flickering light in the hallway they never seemed to fix. But standing there in that cracked tile lobby, I felt something rise in me, a muscle memory I'd forgotten. I walked to the office at the end of the hall and knocked. The woman inside looked up from a mountain of folders. "Can I help you?" Yes, I smiled. I'm here to volunteer. She squinted. Name. Anna Washington. She paused. The Anna Washington Morrison Financial. I nodded. I have time now. And something to say. We started small. A single Tuesday evening workshop. Then a Saturday morning class for seniors trying to understand their Medicare options. Then coffee meetings with young women looking to open their first business accounts. Each time I stood at that whiteboard, I felt that old fire returning. Not the kind fueled by resentment or legacy, but the kind that said you are not done. Turns out sharing what you know is one of the most healing things a woman can do. By mid-month, word had spread. A journalist from a local magazine asked to do a piece on me. We're calling it The Reclamation of Anna Washington. She laughed during our interview. You've become something of a quiet legend. I laughed too. I'm just a woman who forgot who she was for a little while, and then remembered. When the article came out, Rebecca sent me a message. I read it twice. I'm proud of you. I see you now, Mom. Really see you. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then finally I replied, I see me now too. Later that week, I received a small package at my door. No card, no note. Inside was a frame. It held a photo, recent, clearly taken by one of the kids. I was sitting on the park bench at our last family picnic here, pinned back, smiling at Emma as she leaned against me. In the background, Rebecca watched us. Her eyes weren't on her kids. They were on me. She'd caught me laughing. The caption on the bottom of the frame read, "Still central." I held it to my chest, and for the first time since Gate 42, I felt the ache in my heart soften. She didn't need my money. She needed my presence. But to get here, she had to lose the version of me that made everything too easy. And I had to lose the version of myself that made love transactional. There's a line I once wrote in a notebook and forgot to reread for years. A boundary is not a punishment. It's a declaration of worth. This year I declared mine, and slowly the world around me adjusted. The funny thing about drawing a line in the sand is that people either walk away or they come stand beside you. And Rebecca. She was walking toward me now, one step at a time. August arrived with its usual weight, hot skies, long shadows, and a sense that the year was quietly turning its face toward autumn. I marked my 74th birthday in the simplest way possible. No party, no cake, no polite conversations that start with, "How are you holding up these days?" I just brewed a cup of Earl Grey, pulled a chair onto the porch, and sat in the quiet. But around noon, the quiet broke. A car door, footsteps, laughter, then a knock. When I opened the door there, they were Rebecca, Dave, Michael, and little Emma, standing awkwardly like a family trying to relearn how to visit someone they used to know. Rebecca held a box. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said, eyes searching mine. I opened the door wider. "Come in." Inside, the kids immediately ran to the living room, reacquainting themselves with the space. Emma picked up the glass bird figurine she used to think was magical. Michael flopped onto the couch like it remembered him better than he remembered it. Dave hovered near the kitchen island. "We didn't want to intrude," he said. "Just thought maybe it was time." Rebecca placed the box on the counter. "We baked something." Well, they baked something. I just supervised. I lifted the lid. A cake, slightly lopsided, frosting uneven. The words, "Happy birthday, Grandma," written in wonky letters across the top. It was perfect. For the first time in a long while, nobody asked me for anything. They just came to be with me, and that mattered more than all the polished holidays and gift-wrapped obligations that had come before. We spent the afternoon playing board games, eating cake, laughing more naturally than we had in years. Rebecca helped me with the dishes after no protest. No expectations. Just two women standing shoulder to shoulder, rinsing frosting off plates like nothing had ever broken between them. But I knew better. Things had broken. And now we were picking them up piece by piece, not to make it look like it used to, but to build something new. That night after they left, I sat in the quiet again. Only this time it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Later, as I pulled the last candle from the sink, my phone buzzed. A message from my old friend and former Morrison partner, David Morrison. Board voted. Unanimous. If you want it, the seat is yours again. Return to executive advisory. Flexible hours. Full autonomy. I stared at the screen, heart thumping, not with nerves, but excitement. I typed back, "Let's talk Monday." Because here's the truth. Just because I had stepped away from motherhood as a financial crutch didn't mean I was done building leading being. Old age wisdom. Purpose doesn't retire, it reinvents. And I was ready to advise again, to teach again, to walk into rooms where no one knew me as Rebecca's mum, but as Anna Washington, strategist, builder woman, who walked away from the edges of other people's lives to reclaim the center of her own. The next morning, I pulled out my black notebook again, and I wrote at the top of a fresh page, Year 74, what comes next? Because this time, the plan wasn't about saving anyone. It was about becoming myself fully, finally. And this time, the funding was emotional clarity. The currency, boundaries. The investment, love that didn't ask me to disappear. 2 weeks later, I walked into Morrison Financial like I'd never left. It was a Thursday, quiet in the lobby. The smell of roasted coffee drifting from the break room, and the low hum of conversations echoing down glass hallways. I wore a navy blazer, crisp white shirt, and the necklace Walter gave me on our 20th anniversary. Not for nostalgia, but because it reminded me who I'd always been, even when I forgot. David Morrison met me by the elevator. "You look dangerous," he said, smiling. "I plan to be," I replied. He chuckled and led me upstairs to the executive floor, where they'd restored my old office. Same window, same corner view. But everything else had been updated. Sleek desk, ergonomic chair, and on the shelf, a framed copy of that local magazine article, The Reclamation of Anna Washington. I ran my fingers over the glass and nodded once. Let's get to work. The first few weeks were like slipping into an old rhythm. I hadn't realized I'd missed strategy sessions, market reviews, investor calls. But this time, I wasn't climbing a ladder. I was the ladder. I wasn't proving myself. I was guiding others to find their footing. At 74, I wasn't just back. I was better. I mentored 2 young women on the partnership track. Both brilliant. Both a little unsure whether they belonged in boardrooms dominated by blazers and egos. Your voice is your equity, I told them. Spend it wisely, but don't hoard it. One of them cried after our second meeting, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she said no one ever told me I didn't have to wait to be invited. I knew the feeling. For decades, I'd waited for permission to take up space, to speak up without apology, to set limits without guilt. Now I was the woman giving that permission to others and to myself. And back at home, things were shifting too. Rebecca had stopped asking for help, but she had started asking for advice. We'd meet for coffee every other Sunday. No kids, no errands. Just 2 women finally learning how to have a mother-daughter relationship as equals, not extensions. One morning over lattes, she said, "I never realized how much I expected you to carry me. I let you," I admitted. And I thought that was love. What is it now? Accountability. She smiled. "It looks good on both of us." Michael and Emma began visiting again too, but this time because they wanted to. They'd draw pictures in my office while I reviewed spreadsheets. Emma liked to staple pretend memos together. Michael once said Grandma's job is being the boss of grown-ups. Not a bad summary, really. By mid-September, I'd been asked to give the keynote at a women's finance summit. The theme, Power Reclaimed. As I stood at the podium that night, I scanned the crowd, hundreds of women, many older, many younger, all waiting for someone to tell them it wasn't too late. And I told them, you are not a footnote in someone else's story. You are not too late. You are not too old. You are not optional. If you gave the world everything and forgot to save something for yourself, it's not too late to change that. Start now. Reclaim, rebuild, return, not to who you were, but to who you were always meant to be. The room stood, clapped, cried. Afterward, a woman my age approached me. She wore a suit that didn't quite fit, and eyes that had seen too many invisible years. My daughter stopped talking to me 3 years ago, she said. I think it's because I started saying no. I placed a hand on hers. Then maybe that no was your first yes to yourself. She nodded, not in victory, but in understanding. Later that night, I sat in my hotel room and opened the journal again. Page title, Things I've Learned Since Gate 42. And I began. Saying yes all the time is not love, it's erasure. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. Financial freedom means nothing if you're emotionally bankrupt. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you live in full view. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no worries. Just the steady rhythm of someone finally in alignment with her own life. October arrived with gold-edged leaves and the kind of chill that wraps itself around your bones like a memory. I spent most evenings on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the world darken early. Autumn always did this to me, made me reflective, made me quiet. But not sad. Not anymore. That Saturday, I got a letter in the mail. An actual letter, handwritten in blue ink on thick paper with a floral border. No text. No email. No forward from a shared family inbox. It was from Rebecca. Inside were just 2 pages. The first began simply, Dear Mom, I'm writing because I want to say things I couldn't say out loud, not yet. Words get stuck in me when I see you. Maybe that's something I inherited from you. But I'm trying. I know now that I leaned on you for too long. That I expected your support the way one expects running water essential invisible. I know you loved us. But I didn't understand that loving us shouldn't have required you to disappear in the process. And I know that Costa Rica was only the match. The fuel had been building for years. I'm sorry. Not just for that morning, but for all the times I forgot you had a life before us, and a life still waiting after. What you've done this year, it's changed how I see you. But more than that, it's changing how I see myself. You didn't just set boundaries. You modeled what it looks like to reclaim your worth with grace. The second page was shorter. A list. Things I want you to know. I'm no longer afraid of earning my own way. Dave and I had our first real conversation about money and each other in months. I'm reapplying for that non-profit director role you once said I'd be perfect for. Emma wrote an essay titled, My Grandma is the Smartest Person I Know. Michael told his teacher I used to be bad at math, but now Grandma fixed me. I'm learning that needing you is different from depending on you. I'm proud of you. I love you. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal between the pages marked Gate 42 and Reclamation. Then I picked up the phone and called her. Hi, she answered. You have lovely handwriting, I said. She laughed. I rewrote it 3 times. I could tell. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked, how about dinner next week? You mean no kids? Somewhere with real napkins? Absolutely, she said. And this time I'm paying. Well, I said that might be the most shocking development of all. We laughed. Not to fill space. But because it felt good. Because the weight was finally shifting. Later that evening I went for a walk. Just me, the breeze, and the sound of leaves skittering along the sidewalk like secrets finally let go. As I passed a young couple pushing a stroller, I smiled. They reminded me of myself and Walter all those years ago. Hopeful, tired, terrified, determined. I wanted to stop and say love hard, but don't lose yourself doing it. But I didn't. They'd learn. We all do. When I got home, I opened my email and found a message from Morrison Financial's leadership team. They were launching a mentorship program in my name. The Anna Washington Initiative Building Legacy Through Wisdom. I stared at the subject line for a while. Then I clicked reply. Let's make it excellent. That night, I sat by the window with a blanket across my knees, watching the sky empty itself of light. No music, no television. Just the soft rhythm of my breath and the whisper of a life finally lived on my own terms. And in that silence, one last thought arrived. I had once believed that motherhood required disappearing, that good women gave without pause, spoke last, and waited for thanks that might never come. But now I knew the truth. A mother's love can be fierce, but a woman's love for herself must be unshakable. And I was both. At last. November arrived in hushed tones, bare branches, early dusks, and the sound of wind moving through the cracks of old windows. The kind of month that makes you sit still and feel everything. I had returned to the rhythm of purpose. Tuesday workshops, Thursday meetings, Sunday dinners with myself, no longer laced with regret. But something surprising began to happen. Other women, friends, neighbors, even old colleagues started reaching out. It started small. A voicemail from Helen, who lived 2 houses down. "Anna, it's Helen. I read that article about you. It made me cry. I didn't know I was allowed to change." Then Linda, my former assistant from Morrison, emailed me. "Do you ever coach privately? I want to leave my job. I want to start something. Mine." Even at the grocery store, someone stopped me in the produce aisle and whispered, "I told my daughter no for the first time yesterday." It felt like rebellion and freedom all at once. I had unintentionally become a mirror for other women. Not because I was extraordinary, but because I had finally said the quiet part out loud, "I matter too." There's a strange kind of ache that comes with becoming visible again. It's not painful. It's powerful. A recognition that for decades we had all been handing out slices of ourselves and calling it love. One Friday morning, I opened my door to find a handwritten note tucked beneath the welcome mat. No envelope, no name, just 3 lines. "You reminded me I am still here. Thank you." She doesn't own me anymore. I held the paper to my chest, tears prickling not from sadness, but from knowing this was bigger than me now. This was a quiet revolution. And yet, in the middle of all this light, something else stirred. Grief. Not the sharp kind that comes when someone dies. The slow kind that visits you when you realize how much of your life you gave away before learning to ask for anything in return. Some nights I'd sit with a glass of wine and whisper to the past versions of myself. The 42-year-old who skipped her anniversary dinner to babysit. The 55-year-old who lent money with a smile and cried in silence afterward. The 63-year-old who waited at a gate with a suitcase and no seat. I'm sorry, I'd tell her. You deserved better. From them. From me. But I didn't stay there long, because this was not a story of regret. It was a story of return. A few days before Thanksgiving, I got a letter from Morrison's board. They were offering me a permanent advisory seat. Not honorary, not symbolic. Permanent. With full voting power. I read the letter twice, heart-thumping, not because of the title, but because of what it meant. I had rebuilt myself into someone too valuable to ignore. That evening, Rebecca called. "We're hosting this year," she said. "And we want you to come, but only if you want to, and only if you feel celebrated." I smiled. "Do I need to bring anything?" "Just you." "And wine," I added. "I don't trust Dave's taste." She laughed. "Fair." When I hung up, I looked around my house. The pictures, the journals, the peace. It was never about cutting them off. It was about cutting myself free from expectation, from guilt, from the script I never wrote but somehow kept reading from. This year I'd sit at that table not as the fixer or the silent wallet or the smiling martyr. I'd sit as Anna Washington, woman, mother, architect of her own damn life. And when someone asked how I was doing, I'd answer honestly, better than ever, and just getting started. Thanksgiving Day, the house was warm, not from heat, but from presence. Rebecca opened the door with flour on her cheek and a nervous smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." Inside, the scent of roasting vegetables, cinnamon and rosemary lingered like an embrace. The table was set not overly formal, not showy, just intentionally done. Cloth napkins, real silverware. Emma's hand-drawn place cards with everyone's names in crayon. Mine said Grandma Boss of Hearts. It made me laugh, deep and real. Michael ran up to hug me. "Grandma, I saved the good chair for you. It has the squishy pillow." I squeezed his hand. "That's my favorite kind." For the first time in years, I didn't bring anything. Not food, not money, not worry. Just myself. We ate. We talked. Dave didn't check his phone once. Rebecca didn't multitask between bites. The kids told stories. I listened. And when the conversation turned to career updates and dreams, they turned to me. Mom, what are you working on these days? Rebecca asked. I just finalized a mentorship series. It's called The Unwritten Second Act, for women over 60 looking to reclaim their purpose. She blinked, visibly moved. That's amazing. You'd be surprised how many women are ready to begin again. All they needed was permission. Or a mirror, she said softly. After dessert, Emma crawled into my lap and whispered, "Do you have magic?" I smiled. A little. Rebecca watched us from across the room, and for once her gaze wasn't laced with need or expectation. It held something new, respect. Later that night, I walked out onto their back deck alone, cradling a cup of peppermint tea. The stars were out brilliant and stubborn, refusing to be hidden by the city's noise. Rebecca joined me slowly. She stood beside me for a long time before speaking. I'm still scared sometimes. Good, I said. Means you're doing something new, she exhaled. You know, for years I thought strength meant never needing help. Then I needed you so badly I forgot to respect the woman I was leaning on. You weren't the only one, I replied. She turned to me, her voice steady. Thank you for forcing me to grow, even when it hurt. I touched her shoulder. Thank you for meeting me here. There was no fanfare, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a quiet understanding between two women, one rediscovering her power, the other finally letting her keep it. When I returned home that night, I passed the mirror in the hallway. I paused, looked, really looked. Grey hair, brushed back eyes, softened by time but sharpened by clarity. Wrinkles etched not with regret, but with evidence. A body not built for show, but for survival. And for the first time in years, I whispered to my own reflection, I missed you. Then I turned off the light and stepped fully into the life I had waited too long to claim. This wasn't a comeback story. It was a becoming story, and I wasn't done. Not even close, because at 74 years old, I wasn't starting over. I was starting true,